Hello, everybody, and welcome. I've been looking forward to this session with Brennan, Jenga, and Alyssa from Grand Canyon University Global Outreach. Did I say that right? Global Outreach. Okay, got it. And I'm so excited to bring you their stories. We're talking about student missions movements, and hopefully you'll feel inspired. You'll notice that we have put their link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code to view more information about them. And thank you for joining us, all of you. So before we go on to our questions and introductions, I do want to let you all know that you can leave comments, you can ask questions. We'll try to get to your questions. But your comments are a great encouragement to our guests. So don't feel that you are interrupting when you put a comment in the chat. Please do. So welcome, Brennan, Jenga, and Alyssa.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So why don't you go ahead and first introduce each of you before we go and hit our questions?
Yeah, I'll do a brief intro for all of us and then let everyone fill in the gaps. But we're the global outreach team at GCU. Jenga manages the team, and then Alyssa and I are staff coordinators. And so each of us help manage student-led ministries that are working in the city of Phoenix to serve our local refugee and immigrant population, as well as teams who are seeking to connect GCU students to missions opportunities and help train them for cross-cultural ministry. So I'm Brennan. I was a student here at GCU, and I've been working here for about 3 years in this role, and have just loved every minute of it. I grew up in San Jose, California, and came here to GCU to study, and stayed in Phoenix after I graduated.
Awesome. So would you like the Jenga, Alyssa, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jenga Miner. You can tell from the name. I was not born here. Not anywhere near San Jose. I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. Born in Nairobi, Kenya, and moved here in my mid late 20s to go to Moody Theological Seminary, and that's why I studied about missions and urban ministry and developed a passion for the nations. And I've been at GCU now almost 10 years. I've been a coordinator like Brennan and Anlisa, and now I get to manage the team. But honestly, we just work together as a team and collaborate to serve students and to provide them with opportunities to serve cross culturally.
Perfect. Alyssa, did you want to add
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alyssa Kumada. I grew up here in Phoenix, and I also graduated from GCU, my undergrad and my master's. And similar to Brennan, I was also a student leader through Global Outreach as well when I was here. And Jenga was my boss then too, which is pretty cool. Um, and so, yeah, that's what being a part of the Global Outreach as a student can just share about how incredible that experience was and how it prepared me to go on the mission field afterwards for several years too. And so been back here in the US for just a little over a year, and started working here at GCU just 3 weeks after we got back. So just celebrated last month my 1 year anniversary with GCU.
Congratulations. So let's get to know you guys a little bit better. So how did you each become a believer, and when did your faith become your own? Whoever wants to start.
I'll start us off. Like I said, I grew up in San Jose, and I grew up in a kind of ministry family. I'm not a pastor's kid, but my parents both worked at the local Christian school, and my whole family worked there. So it was kind of like the family business, and I was raised that way. And so it took until probably late in my high school time in high school till my faith really became my own. Going through high school, I had a dream of being a sports broadcaster. I just wanted to call baseball games and get paid. But by the time I was ending my time in high school, I was kind of faced, I think, by my faith, and was challenged to step into a ministry role and to study at GCU. And I studied worship arts because I did music as well. And so I felt God calling me to use that gifting for the church. And so that was kind of the first time I made a decision that was not entirely selfish, but was more guided by the hand of Christ. And that's how I ended up where I am now.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can go next.
Okay.
So I'm a pastor's kid. And so I remember accepting Jesus into my heart at a very young age. I was 4. But even though I was really young, like I know that that moment was still very real because I remember it so clearly as well. And so growing up in the church, like I genuinely always enjoyed it, but for a long time, like it was just something that we did it because it's what my family did, and it felt like it was more of like my family's culture, right? This is just like what we do. And so my faith didn't really become my own until high school. I and can owe that to the Lord using really awesome youth leaders at my church, a really great youth group, and that youth leaders that just really invested into me and discipled me, and through just different conversations and events like church camp and those sort of things, the Lord really softened my heart and was just really opened up to like this what this really looks like with my faith, and having that be a personal relationship versus this is just something my family does. And yeah, just really being blown away by the difference in that. And yeah, so that's how I came to the Lord.
Perfect. And Jenga?
Yeah, I started attending church at the age of 7. That's what I can recall. And I grew up, doing church things. And as a kid, I was a terrible kid. I'll get in so much trouble, and then I'll go to church on Sunday and say a prayer again. I'm like, Lord, forgive me. But it was until, similarly to Alisa, in my senior year of high school, I started hanging out with some friends, and they were smarter than me, and so I wanted to pass a big exam that year. And eventually, I found myself rededicating my life to church. I mean, to Jesus. Started going to church, and from there on, it's been an uphill journey, and of following Jesus and wanting to know Him more, and yeah, and right away I sensed a call like to be in ministry, like that's what God wanted me to do, but didn't know the specifics of what that would look like. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. This lays a foundation for what you're doing today. But let's dig a little further in the past, though. When did it become clear to you that all your roles would be in missions and the church? I mean, describe that processes. I mean, you're coming from you bring a lot of students in who are seeking a purpose or a ministry role, or even short term or long term. So describe it to those possible audience out there.
Yeah, I'll start. Kind of why I stopped my story where I stopped is because I knew you were going to ask this question. But when when I got here at GCU, I felt a really strong call to ministry because I came in as a worship arts major. I thought that God was going to use my giftings in music to serve the church, and that's really what I wanted to do. When I was a freshman, I went to apply for a student leadership position on the chapel band at GCU, and I actually didn't end up getting that. And it was a really frustrating and challenging time for my calling because, like I had mentioned, I felt that God was calling me to come here to do this. And that door got closed for me. And so I started really questioning, you know, God's call in my life. And a couple weeks later, I got an email from the former global outreach manager who had offered me a student leader position in this program. I had had some cross cultural ministry experience growing up. My family hosted some Chilean ministries, and we would kind of go down and bring students, high school students, and they would come and stay with us when they were support basing. So that was really all I had up till that point. And when I got my role as a student leader on global outreach, I think that's when this call kind of began. I started, as a part of my leadership position, I started serving in English classes and tutoring refugee students in English. And through this opportunity, God provided me with all the friends I still have from GCU, all the people and opportunities I got people I got to meet and the opportunities I had through the gift that God had already given me and instilled in me since I was born, which was English. I just didn't know that was a gift until that moment. Um, and so through this program, I think God showed me that the way I could contribute to the church wasn't just limited to my musical ability. It was expanded to so many other things. Something as simple as my language could be used to further advance His kingdom. And from those 3 years, I was a student leader. I think God pulled me more away. Like by the time I was a senior, I was like, I just want to get a job at a church and just do ministry. And then God answered that call by making me a janitor for a couple years at my church. But a couple years later, I got the opportunity to come back, and I think everything I get to do for the students here and help cultivate that in them is the reason why I do this, because I saw how God used this program to train students to serve cross culturally and learn a lot more about themselves and a lot more about what God has for them. And I hope to continue doing it for the rest of my life in some capacity.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
Who wants to go next?
I can go next. Mine is a little longer. Like I said, when I got saved and sensed a call for ministry, it was more specifically into pastoral ministry. So, and I was about to go to college in Kenya, and so proceeded to go to the University of Nairobi. But in my back mind, in my mind, I knew I'm gonna be a pastor at some point. And so right away, I got involved with the Christian Union at the University of Nairobi, and later with a ministry called Life Ministry, which is crew here in the U.S. And I was doing evangelism, I was doing missions, I was facilitating groups, helped write Bible studies, and all those things. And so I was super involved until my junior year, where I met a mentor and started really speaking into my life and really redirected me to pastoral ministry. I'm like, hey, I see you. You'll be a good fit for this church. They're hiring. And so by the time I graduated and started working right away at a church in Kenya, and then, um, but also I think for me growing up, I was sponsored by one of the major child sponsorship programs here in the U.S. And so that left a mark in me in some way where I knew that God uh, gave me so many opportunities that so many other people didn't get in my community, and so I needed to give back to my community. So in my mind, like going through college, eventually US, I was like, I need to do something for the least of these, and so I always tried to find ways to do that, and went to Moody Theological Seminary to pursue a master's degree there. And Moody is known for missions, and I went there hoping I'll get trained to do church planting. But all the missions events we were doing, like in the city, doing evangelism, going like to the homeless shelter. Uh, I think by my second year, I knew that's what God wanted me to do. I wanted to, engage both here and engage out there. My motto, things I do now, is are based on wanting to engage the people, like in the city, be faithful wherever God has placed me, either that will be Kenya or in the US, but also engage other places. And moved back to Kenya, and then ended up moving back here, got married, and my roommate used to work at GCU, and so he hired me, and that's how I found myself in this role. I never knew I could do this could be a job, working at a higher education institution and get to create opportunities for students. But it's been a joy to be able to do this the last almost 10 years.
Awesome. Melissa?
Yeah. So for me, it was in high school. Clearly, a lot of transformation happened in my life in high school. So if anyone's listening and they're a youth leader, continue. Truly, like, it's made such an impact in my life. Those who were consistent in mine. And so I went on a short-term trip to Bolivia with my church, And that really just like for the first in my life just like ignited something within me that I was like passionate about. I struggled up until then being like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And now looking back, like high school's still so young, but at the time it was like everyone seems like they know what it is and I don't. And it was on that trip where like the Lord just like set my heart on fire for missions, and to be able to see that, and to see it firsthand in a different culture. And so from that moment on, I knew that I was called to do missions to a certain extent. I just didn't know what that looked like specifically yet. And so I just continued to walk forward and tried to seek out opportunities to just learn more about missions and do different things to help to hopefully help try to kind of like narrow that down and specify a little bit more of like what could that actually look like for me long term. And so I continued to do some short-term trips in high school, and then once I was in college, I helped lead some short-term teams. I mentioned that I was a student leader on global outreach, so that experience, and then also during my summers in college, would intern with some missions organizations. One of those actually being WorldVenture. Spent a summer in, at the headquarters in Denver, which was really cool.
Awesome.
The other side, yeah, more of like the headquarters side of it versus the field,
Yeah.
um, and so anyways, through all those experiences, the Lord continued just like affirm, like, yes, missions. And it just kind of kept getting more and more like specific as like the years went on. And one of my final internships before I graduated was in Guatemala with an organization called Students International. And that is long story short, how I even like ended up meeting my husband. And so the Lord was calling us both individually to serve as missionaries, and then brought us together. And so after I graduated GCU, we got married, and then we ended up going full time with that organization, but to Nicaragua for 4 years. And so then we came back a year ago, and even though like the Lord has called us back to the States, still continues to open up those doors and opportunities like he did over 10 years ago to be a part of missions, no matter where he has placed me. And so it's just been an incredible journey, and it's really cool to reflect on these moments and to see just God through all of it, and excited to see what doors he will continue to open to continue to be part of missions.
Awesome. And I hope any students watching out there that you'll be inspired by their stories. But let's talk about the Global Outreach Program. Tell me a little bit about it, the history, how was it created?
Great question. So Globe, a couple of years ago, GCU was kind of going down, and then there was a new leadership that came over and took over, and part of that team was, our dean of students and pastor of campus, hired a director actually of local and global outreach, about around, I would say, 2015. But even before that, there was some things happening from 2012. So I think global dates around that time, 2012, there was, still a local outreach ministry and short-term mission trips. So there will be a trips. All the trips were led by staff members within the student affairs department, because our team is part of the larger department of student affairs. Um, but it was in 2016, or in 2015, the team had grown so much. There was the university was starting to grow as well, and everything that is done at GCU is our motto is student led, staff assisted. So they needed to hire more student leaders, and so they hired more staff as well. And at that point, instead of being logo, we became two different teams. There was a local outreach ministry and a global outreach ministry. So by the time I joined in 2016, we were separate teams. Local with their own almost 80 student leaders at that point, and global was about 30 student leaders. So that's what I recall when global was started. But also there was not too far from the school, there was an apartment complex where refugees were being resettled, by resettlement agencies. So it was easy. Our students back then felt they needed to do something. And so it's actually not even staff that started some of the initiatives that we have. Students saw a need and they started going there. and they will seek guidance from the staff who were here back in the day. And then that apartment complex was later demolished, and so families were scattered all over. And around 2016, there was one apartment complex where some of the families settled, and so we started going there consistently on doing kids ministry, doing home visits, um, teaching English ESL to these families, helping them with jobs, teaching them how to drive bus, to ride a bus, and helping them with their citizenship exam, and all that. So those are some of the things I've heard about how global outreach started back in the day.
Awesome. And that kind of gets us into the our little bit of our topic and probably your guys' hearts. Tell me about your work with refugees and immigrants, and what countries are they coming from?
Yeah, good question. Whenever I get where are people coming from, I just tell them anywhere and everywhere. I think I don't want to say this statistic very confidently, so take it with a grain of salt. But I believe within a 10-mile radius, there's 70 plus languages spoken, or probably even a 5-mile radius of campus. So lots of different and diverse communities here. I would say of the groups that we're serving regularly, I would say we have a lot of Afghani refugees, Burmese refugees who are Rohingyan, Central African refugees, and then Central American refugees and immigrants. So those are the primary populations. But even in some of our English classes, you'll find Ukrainian students, and you'll find from all over the world. So yeah, between all those different groups, there's lots of different belief systems. I would say probably about 60, maybe even more now, percent of the population that our students get to serve are coming from Muslim backgrounds. And yeah, that's very briefly kind of the different kinds of groups. So most of them are coming from, have a refugee status, which means were fleeing from a traumatic situation. It's not safe for them to be in their home countries. And then the other two categories of people would be considered immigrants, which are people who come for economic reasons or are come by choice. So like Django, for example, is an immigrant, not a refugee. And then the third and much smaller category would be an asylum seeker, which are people who have fled their homes because they're unsafe and they're still awaiting their refugee status from the UNHCR.
Wow. So of the refugees that you all serve, what are the different situations that you've encountered that they have faced? Even immigrants. Go ahead and share it from the immigrant perspective too.
Yeah, I'll start, and then if you guys have others to fill in, that'd be great. But I think for a lot of these families, I know specifically those from Central Africa were fleeing violence in their homes because of the war in Congo, or DR Congo, sorry.
Yeah.
And so lots of these families are fleeing from situations where they were coming from homes where people were being killed, or for example, the Afghani refugees I was sharing about mostly got here in about 2021, 2020, when the Taliban regained control of the country. Many of those refugee families were coming here because they needed to be protected from the threat in their country, and ended up here during those years.
And what is, is there a difference between what a refugee faces and what an immigrant faces situation wise?
Oh, go for it, Alyssa. You got it.
Okay, well, feel free to hop on that as well too. I mean, short answer would be would be yes. There are certain things that will kind of overlap with each other, but I mean, Brennan mentioned a big part of one of those differences is that the reason why they're leaving their country. Refugees are leaving because of persecution, war, violence, where immigrants are able to leave voluntarily, whether education reasons, economic, etc. There's so much uncertainty as a refugee. Especially with they may be told before they even get to the US, like these are things that will be able to help assist you and you can, bank on these things happening. And then they get here and things have changed. Laws have changed, administrations have changed, and now they're trying to figure out, okay, what are we even be able to be offered or not at all. And so there's just so much uncertainty that's really ultimately so out of their control. Many of them are, the waiting process is very long. So they're spending a lot of time in refugee camps before. And it's not uncommon for them to be there for a long time or at several different refugee camps before they finally get to the US. So there's just a lot of uncertainty and just, constant unknown as a refugee.
Yeah, and I've heard, watching several documentaries on the refugee camps, they're prime targets for crime and violence and there's a lot of stuff that happens there. It's not as sheltered of place that they should stay long term. You can speak into that if you feel led to right now, but any case, when a refugee and immigrant, you've spoken some of the obstacles that they encounter in your answer. But what are the kinds of transitions that you have experienced with the refugees or immigrants that they have to overcome? Describe some situations for me.
Yeah, great question. One of the main things that our students really help with is being a friend. I think, you know, as an immigrant, like I moved here, I knew English. I could speak. I could use social media. I could use a phone and all that. Some of these people, especially the older ones, they're coming from living in a camp. These are probably people who lived in a village. They've been living in a refugee camp where there's no education, there's no, you know, good sanitation, and so the concept of a house for some of them is something very different. And so when they come here, they're really starting from square zero. So doing home visits for our students is very crucial because we can get to help them really understand the American way of doing life because it's very different. Having an apartment here is different from living in a camp. The things you do in a camp, you could cook with coal outside. You can't do that in America. You're gonna start the fire alarm, and soon you're gonna be wondering what's happening. So one of the apartment complex, the owner, would call me sometimes to go help and talk to these families because I speak Swahili, and they understood Swahili and help them with understanding some of the things they can do and some and not do. And then English, not knowing English limits the kind of jobs they can do, limits, like how to apply for jobs. Most of the things you have to do on a website. So it's having to help them like create an account, create a resume, and creating a resume. And like I did that recently, and that was one of the hardest thing I've done. One, they don't they sometimes they don't have any documents to show they went to school, so it's trying to show they have skills and help those skills translate in a resume, and it's a very difficult job. So you need people who are compassionate and understand the experiences that they have and be able to offer them a job. So English is a major one, and we partner with different organizations to help them learn the language, and it can take a while for them to do that.
Yeah,
I'll add one more story
yeah,
that I was
please do.
reminded of.
Mhm.
Earlier this year, kind of speaking to some of the things that Jenga's talking about, we had a dad who was an Uber driver because that's a job that can easily be done if you don't have English, and because of some of the discrimination that these kinds of people groups face, even here in the U.S., this driver, this dad, was driving, and one of their passengers had complained to the company and accused them of drinking and driving while they're driving. And I mean, we know this family, and they come from a background where that like this guy has never drank in his life, and so he was put on a suspension from driving or working, and he got this long message that he couldn't read, and one of our students was over and he showed it to them and was like, what does this mean, what's happening? And they were able to read that message and help advocate for them so that they could get their job back, saying like, hey, we know that this wasn't what was happening. So it's really cool to see how, because of their access to an American friend, they're able to be advocated for so that he can continue driving and providing for his family.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's a shame that someone complained about that. So you've mentioned some of the belief systems a little bit earlier in our conversation, but in recent months or the past year, what kind of religious backgrounds are they coming from?
Like I've mentioned, mostly Muslim, and that is actually a very broad term. There's a lot of diversity in Islam, so it ranges from families who, one of our male student leaders will come and the mom will welcome them with open arms and a hug, while others won't even speak to him. So it really depends on the family when it comes to that specific group. The two specific major Muslim, or I guess I would say three major Muslim groups, are Afghani Muslims, Rohingya Muslims, which are a people group from Southeast Asia that's really heavily persecuted, and then a lot of African Muslims as well. And so between those three different major groups, you'll see a lot of diversity. And then you'll have a lot of the African families who come from Christian backgrounds who are here. We even have a ministry that serves a local refugee church and helps run their Sunday school programming. So there are a lot of families from the Congo who end up here, and they have a place where they can be welcomed into a community that is looks like them and speaks like them and shares a culture. Which is really, really great. And it's cool that our students get to take part of that. And then when it comes to all the different groups, obviously there's diversity within those, especially when it comes to the children and the youth who are now transitioning into a Western culture and are being faced with more postmodern ideas. So we'll have, older youth or even kids who would probably closely identify with being agnostic or, not really paying attention to their faith at all. And so our students get to come alongside them and encourage, whether that's the faith of their parents or not, a Christian lifestyle.
Yeah. So I've often heard from different people who work with different, sorry, 1 second. I often heard that from different people who've worked with different types of refugees and immigrants, asylum seekers, that there's trauma that they deal with in the aftermath. So what kinds of trauma have you observed, and how are you helping them navigate those things?
It's a great question. I mean, one of the trauma is trauma of losing your loved ones. So some of the families we visit, uh, they're here and they still are waiting and wondering if their loved ones are still alive. And so just encouraging them through that, and it's mainly what we can do mostly is just listen, and and encourage them, and and try to hope with them that they'll find their loved ones. For example, I have a friend. He's here, but he doesn't know where his wife is and his two kids. So he's still hoping and waiting that he'll hear something. And so that's it's a long journey of, it's been 3 years since he moved here, and he's still doesn't know if he'll ever see them or not. And so he can move on with his life. Like, do I get married, or do I still wait? Do I marry again, or do I still wait and hope that my wife will be found in some way? So and I can only imagine just the pain of not knowing where your spouse and your kids are, especially the kids. And so uh, helping them to, especially this man is a believer, so really showing how, like, our Lord, like the suffering that he went through and the way that he understands our suffering, it's very important for him to deal with that. And for him to know that he's not doing that by himself. I think that's one of the greatest things our friends appreciate.
Yeah, that I imagine that would be pretty hard.
Mhm.
What a conundrum to be in. What a painful place to be in.
Mhm.
Um, what opportunities are there for the church? And I'm talking about the church as the greater, the building, the people in the building,
Mhm.
to get involved in refugees and immigrants in their community to meet those practical needs, but also to share the gospel. Because from my experience, when I've talked with regular church folk, the intimidation seems to be from, hey, they're Muslim. How do I share Christ with them? Hey, they're Hindu. They believe in many gods. How do I share Christ with them? There's an intimidation factor. So what
Mhm.
would you say to them?
The opportunities are, like being a welcomer, like so many scriptures that talk about that, welcoming the stranger in your land, and sharing, uh, it's the benefits that the Lord has given to you. So, one of the things I would encourage churches to do: find a resettlement agency in your city, in your neighborhood. Reach out to them. Most of them have like a co-sponsorship program, where a family can be assigned another family, and you get to be their friends. Most organizations ask for a commitment of 3 months, and the goal is to be a present friend. Be there with them. Show them, where do you go to the grocery store? Where How do you ride a bus, or teach them how to drive a car if they don't know, at your own risk. That's always a fun one.
Hey, as a former motor vehicle
Yeah,
operator who
yeah.
did driver's tests, I get it.
Yeah. Oh, practice with them, basic English, conversational English with them. Invite them to your home. Most of these people, the cultures that they come from, they're very communal. Being in somebody's house, being in their own house, it means so much to them. So, I've seen families that have adopted, refugee families, adopting quotes, and they invite them to Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays, introducing them to all the American laws and different things that Americans love, and introduce them to cheese. They probably won't like it the first time. I hated cheese the first time. Uh, learn the kind of foods that they like. But look, so find those opportunities, and help them find jobs, like job career fairs. If your church can do like a career fair and invite people, you can have local business people in your church, opening up their business to hire these people who some probably don't even have a high school certificate. Give them opportunity, job training. There's so many things churches can do, but the least of those things is just being present, being there, encourage them, and walk with them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So this is the fun question. How have you seen God at work in your work?
Hmm.
Ooh.
I'll start with one story. I'm sure all of us probably have an answer, but this is a story that I was told like a couple weeks ago. But we have a VBS ministry that runs biweekly at a couple of the complexes we work with. And one of them has been there, 10 plus years, the other one for the last 5. And we started a new partnership with a refugee co-sponsorship organization this year. And a student got paired with a family, so they'll bring volunteers and do all the things that Django was just talking about with these families. And one of the families we got paired with happened to be in the same housing complex that we've already been in doing VBS for however long. And a group of students was over at this family's house the other day, and they're a Muslim family. And the parents went to go and pray because it was that time of day, and their daughter stayed out, and they said, "Hey, can you practice English with my daughter?" And they did. So they practiced. They decided to use the Bible as a tool for English practice, and so they started with John 3:16. We're going to read through this and see if you can read it. And this girl saw the passage John 3:16, and she said, "Oh, I already know it." And my students were like, "What?" And she closed her eyes and she said the verse from memory. Because over this past year, the VBS group has been doing Bible memory with the kids. And so she had memorized multiple biblical passages without these students even knowing. So you could see, I think, through that story how the things that our students get to do with these kids weekly and being consistent is making a huge impact on the life of even just this girl who, despite all the things that her family has gone through, maybe would have never interacted with a Christian unless she ended up here. And now she's memorizing scripture. And I think that's one story just this semester that I think really helps me keep going. It's really, really exciting.
Those Joshua stones.
Mm-hmm.
A really cool story that happened just back in October was, so we have a ministry that works with refugee youth, and like junior high, high school. And the truth of the matter is that this is a hard ministry. This is just a hard age in general. And then a lot of these kids are dealing either with personal trauma or secondary trauma from their parents. And so and a reoccurring issue that happens every week is just, how do you just control this group? There's a lot of behavioral issues, and for the leaders it can just be draining and exhausting, but they continue to show up and be faithful and just be consistent lights to these kids over the years. And so there's a specific group of teenage girls that some of our female leaders have just been so consistent with being in their lives, through the good and a lot of the bad. And at a big event we held on campus, they just started having a conversation with them, and the girls started asking more about having a relationship with Jesus. And they prayed with them right there, and those girls accepted Christ. And here we are, maybe, a month and a half later, and they're doing consistent weekly Bible studies for these girls and meeting with them still consistently and discipling them. And again, for a ministry that it was hard to see a lot of times, like the fruit, like this was so cool to see after it just shows like the being consistent presence in those girls' lives over the years, and to be able to see that.
That's beautiful. Very beautiful. Perspectives is talked a lot about, how God will, if we don't come and reach the people that he wants us to reach, he'll bring them to us. And it sounds like he's doing that. So what about you, Jenga?
Oh man, I think the way I'm seeing God move is through the student leaders. Sometimes would encourage them to follow the Lord in a certain way, and sometimes we can face resistance because it's new ideas or new approaches. But I am so thankful for this group of students in ways that they are dedicating their time even beyond the time we ask them to, that is required based on their scholarship positions. So like one thing we tried this year is more home visits, and it's been so beautiful. Even earlier today we met a girl that has been doing home visits, and she's just a freshman and she's just on fire. She has amazing ideas. Just seeing that is, encouraging. So we're seeing the older students discipling the younger ones, and the cycle keeps going. And that's how our ministries operate. So it's so beautiful to see that continue happening.
That is beautiful when you see it. I mean, you know it's true passion when they're giving more than the allotted time. You
Hmm.
know they begin to care, and that's key.
Yeah, for real.
So how do you recruit the students to serve cross culturally?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the things Jenga just shared is one of the primary ways we find our student leaders is they will go and serve really consistently as leaders, and they all bring volunteers as a part of their ministry. So about I don't know 80 to 90% of the leaders we get become leaders because of their experience volunteering. So really, I mean, I can't take any credit for it. It's our students doing it for us.
Mhm.
Um, but we every year we go through we have a new team of student leaders, about 82 of them, and we'll interview them in the spring semester, and then hire them for the next school year and train them through August, and they'll start their ministry, and the cycle continues. So it's about 90% of them are they just do it. They show up consistently, and they build a heart for it, and that's how they become leaders. And others, it's like my story where I randomly got selected to be a part of the team because of crazy circumstances, and that's how God moves in some of these kids' lives. So, yeah.
Awesome. Do you ever get students who have fears or questions about serving cross culturally, and how do you help them get past their fears and questions?
I think the biggest thing is, and I'll start in as if you guys have other things to add, please do. But I think the biggest thing is exposure. I feel like a lot of the students we engage with are those who are kind of already in it, already get it. So I remember being asked this question um, at a conference a couple of years ago with other universities trying to do similar programs, and I think one of the things I took away from interacting was just the way that you build a heart for immigrants and students is by connecting them with one another. I can think of countless stories where we'll have a student from, Montana or Wyoming, where they grew up in communities that looked like them, and that was how they grew up. And all of a sudden, they end up here at GCU and go to one of our ministries on a Tuesday afternoon, and they met, three kids named Muhammad, and I get exposed to things they've never experienced in their lives, and that's where I see God working in their lives and breaking their hearts for the nations. Um, so I think really, like, what it comes down to is just having someone who's willing to take you into that, having a friend who knows a friend, so that you can become exposed to cross cultural ministry. And I think when all of a sudden you're in a room teaching English to a Rohingyan refugee, it's really hard not to have a great heart for those people. And so that's really my answer to that question. It's just any kind of exposure you can give to someone will soften their heart.
And and it gives a face to a number,
Mhm.
because we often hear about there's so many people that don't know Christ in the world, and it's hard to put a face to that until you get involved cross culturally and get to know their stories and ask them questions about where they came from, and
Mhm.
what they're doing, how they're doing, and not expecting instant results, but going very slowly, I would imagine.
Mhm.
Um, so tell me more about how you are helping students get connected to short-term, mid-term, and long-term mission opportunities. And is there any upcoming that some students should know about?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so one of the biggest thing that we do is we do a missions fair in the fall, um, around October, and we invite about 20 to 30 or 40 organizations. WorldVenture is one of them. And so students can find those organizations on our website, the Global Spiritual Life website. All the organizations are listed there. We also have a gcu.missions Instagram page. So we've promoted a couple trips there. We have, I think, close to 20 trips that are happening between spring break and summer break. We have the Spain one with Brennan with WorldVenture that's already full. We have a trip going to Indonesia. I think that has only one spot left. We have a trip going with crew to Cuba. That's a fast one, honestly. So that's and we were worried about that trip. And by Thanksgiving, we had 17 applicants.
Wow.
Uh, 17 students applied during the Thanksgiving break, which is crazy. And we use a platform called Managed Missions. If you go on our website or on GCU Missions Instagram page, you see a link tree that takes students to that page, and students can submit an application, or they can go directly to to the organizations we partner with, because they handle all the registration, fundraising, and support for the students. But also, if a student wants to go and they're probably overwhelmed and it's too many choices, they can come me with Brennan and Lisa or myself or with our missions team. They can DM the missions team and somebody will grab coffee with them or lunch and help them only discern where God might want them to go serve. So those are short term and, like 1 week during spring break, 2 weeks over the summer. We also have organizations that provide like internships, and then organizations that also provide opportunities for people to be able to serve for more than a year if they want to go long term. So, and yeah, our office is open 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and would love to connect with any students and help them to explore what God has for them.
Yeah, and I can tell you from firsthand experience how a short-term mission trip can really transform.
Mhm.
And so, on that subject, when a student returns from the shorter midterm mission opportunity, do you debrief and what does that look like? And what kinds of experiences do they share with you that you can share with us?
Yeah, so it varies. So we the way we work here, we tend to leave that to the organizations. So an organization provide a trip leader, and they are in charge of doing all the debriefing and all that. But as a staff, we get to lead a trip as well every year, and so when we are leading a trip, we're more involved. We help students with fundraising. We help them during the trip. We're doing team meetings during the trip, and then when they come back, we're helping them to not only take time to reflect and ask themselves, what did they learn from this trip? What is God wanting them to do? And so, and also try to connect them with the ministries that we are doing here. We're like, okay, you had this amazing mom experience. God is still working in our city. There's still people who need to hear Jesus. The nations are here. What can you do about that? So for some people, that could be the next step. For others, is they go and do more in their local churches. Maybe their local churches don't have a missions department. They can go and help facilitate that. And we have seen some students do that. Or it could be like Anlisa, she graduated GCU and she's like, okay, I'm going to move to Nicaragua for maybe 1 year. It ends up being 4 years. And so there's so many pathways after the trip of what that can look like. Or even within our leadership structure, we have, like head leaders who oversee a ministry team. For some people, they go on a trip and they're like, man, I wanna lead a team in Global or MOCO or another department here at GCU. Or in other cases, we've had like Brennan used to lead a trip to Costa Rica, and I was like, Brennan, you don't need to lead that trip anymore. We need to find a student that can lead that trip. And so, helping students to learn as well and become trip leaders as well is another course of action.
That's great that you're teaching them to lead, not just follow, and that's fabulous.
Mhm.
Um, so we are getting in at the end of our hour. How can people be praying for the students, for GCU Global Outreach, and for the three of you?
Yeah, I'll start. I think one of the biggest things you can always pray for our program and our students is boldness of our students to proclaim Christ boldly in the relationships that they're building, so that that impact can be made on the families and the kids that we serve. I think continuing to allowing them to be challenged and to grow, and for the three of us that God can use us to push them in those areas. I think that's one big thing, because I know that if we're continually sticking to that foundation in our ministry, then God's work will be successful because we're not getting in his way. And so I think that's one thing I'm always praying for, and just for the families that we serve to be able to find their footing in their new situations, and not survive but thrive. And then very specifically, but for the three of us, we are doing interviews with students this week to find some new student leaders for the next semester. So discernment, and that God brings us the right students as well.
That's great. So you heard those prayer requests. Hope you're making a note of that out there. All right. What about you, Jenga or Alyssa?
I would say, to kind of go along with the boldness, is soften hearts too. Soften hearts for the families that we're trying to reach, and for them to have their hearts softened to be able to hear the gospel, and hearts softened too for our students, especially maybe in regards to being open to for ministry to maybe look different than it has in the past, and being willing to explore different ways to continue to engage with those that we're serving, and then definitely always echoing the what Brendan was saying about just wisdom and discernment for us as staff always.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, yeah, those are great prayer requests. I think the other thing is we're not just doing missions here; we're also doing there. So we want to see GCU being one of the leading mission sending universities. So that's one of my desires. Probably I set a crazy goal last year of 10% of our students. That's too far. It's probably close to 2%. But I have a dream of like 10% of our students are engaged in cross cultural ministry through our program or through their local churches and other organizations out there.
That's it. That's a great prayer request. And I often, say, and I've heard other people say the same thing, that the only people that have, we're the only ones that have this small vision, because God has the much bigger vision. So is 10% really out of line to pray for?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
because God is much bigger, and with the work you guys are doing down there, the workers are few. You always need more students, and more people to cover the need. That's definitely a growing need.
Mhm.
In fact, when I when I lived in Phoenix, moved down there in '92, um,
Mhm.
you didn't see any you know immigrants, refugees. I mean, maybe they were there,
Mhm.
but over the years in the Phoenix area, exceeding to Tempe and all that, it's like what, tripled the amount of immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and
Mhm.
so the harvest is here,
Mhm.
and we just need to be willing to be the hands and feet to share our lives with others,
Mhm.
and be willing to embrace the things that seem a little intimidating,
Yeah.
um, to talk to people because they're just people,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So
Mm. True.
this was a good session. For all of you out there, if you'd like to, there you can scan the QR code. You can go look at the link in there. Definitely follow them on Instagram. They got a vibrant Instagram there, and continue to pray for them as they serve the nations that are right at our doorstep,
Mm.
and send students to the distant cross cultural areas. So, thank you, all three of you, for sharing your stories, for sharing your heart with us. We appreciate you. We love working with you. So, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Stay with us. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at session, what are we at? Session 5, where we're going to talk about women's ministries. So we'll see you in about an hour.